thought with that, Brad, but because I still agree with you completely. Have you ever spoken with any of your personal officials about your stance on any of this?
Every day. I try to, well, I mean, like personal face-to-face.
No, I mean a phone call, an email,
yes,
on their website.
Yes, I'm a big, advocate of calling your senators, calling your representatives, letting them know your stance on what you feel is right or what you feel is wrong or a certain issue. I don't consider myself a Democrat or Republican. I don't consider myself a conservative or a liberal. I consider myself as like an independent, free-thinking person that can. Yeah, exactly. An independent, free-thinking person, because I agree with both liberal and Democrat ideas, liberal and conservative ideas on certain points, and then some of both sides, I'm like, whoa, you both are kind of out of hand here. But
at least they're talking about it.
Yes, and I try to voice my opinion to my representatives, even, as a college student. And Senator Durbin, I'm not so keen on his stance on gun control, but I am keen on his stance of, the student loan issue and some of his national debt issues as far as that goes. I will send a letter to him and I will tell him I don't like what you're doing here, but I like what you're doing here. And then when it comes down, it's time to vote. I vote on my strongest, most passionate issue that I agree or disagree with, and it is what it is. And I try to find the best politician that suits my ideal.
I'm sorry, Brad, you're in Illinois?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. I somehow thought you were not from the northern state. I guess I thought Dwayne said your name like you guys went out shooting together, but maybe that was just another one of his friends. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I also have to go. I know you were saying your goodbyes, and I just dragged you into another 5 minutes. State. But I happen to be going to Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. We have a briefing at the White House on this issue, and we're going to be meeting with legislators on Capitol Hill. And I'm really grateful for the conversation tonight because it's brought up some new thoughts for me about it. So I appreciate that. And you may or may not come up somewhat in conversation on Wednesday. So if your nose itches or your ears are burning, that's my fault.
Well, feel free to give me a call if you have any questions. I'm always available. So I appreciate everything.
Are you going to be
I appreciate everything
in Washington?
I'm sorry, Dwayne?
Are you going to be speaking in Washington?
I'm going with part of an organization, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and our goal is to defend the Second Amendment while making the world a safer place for children. So we have a briefing at the White House with legislators regarding the state of affairs there, and then there are about 300 of us coming nationally. We're going to be dispersed among the Capitol to discuss with our own elected officials what's going on and get a feel for the pulse of the nation in that way.
Well, I'm glad that I'm glad that people. It's one thing for people to bash something or bash me as a gun owner, but if they don't actually voice their opinion on a national or a local legislative level, then I don't feel they have a right to complain. So, but I'm glad that that's all that I ask for somebody that's going to have a strong opinion about something. Just make sure you let people know and you actually do something about it. Don't sit around and complain.
I'm an Aries and a native New Yorker. I think I've got the strong opinion covered.
Oh, you're another Aries, Jenny.
I am.
I gotta go. I gotta go get some food. So, everybody, thank you for the speaking time. You
Goodbye,
guys take care.
Brad. It's been nice to meet you.
Y'all take care.
Wayne, you were trying to
Jenny,
say something.
if you don't mind my asking, what is your opinion about schools having? Whoa, I don't know what that was, but okay. I was asking Jenny, what is your opinion about schools having armed guards?
As I mentioned, I'm a school teacher, and there have been a couple of occasions already nationally where someone has left a weapon in the restroom. So that type of human error concerns me more than the concept of having armed guards in schools. I know that the NRA put out this SHIELD program, and I listened to a thing that Anderson Cooper hosted the other night on that. I think that the intent is correct. But here in New York City, we already have some high schools where the students have to walk through metal detectors to get educated to live lives they want to lead. And I don't want them to worry about a weapon in their building. I don't think it is the first course of action that should be taken, although I understand why it has been suggested. But I personally would not send my child to a school with armed guards, nor work in one.
That's interesting, and I think this has a lot to do with different parts of the country that we come from, because as someone who's grown up around guns most of my life and raised my son around guns as well, I have never actually seen somebody accidentally just leave a gun sitting in a restroom, and it never occurred to me that would happen with someone who's actually trained to handle it properly, although I understand accidents happen.
It's just human error.
My personal opinion, human error, which is one of the reasons.
It happened at JFK with one of the Homeland Security officers a month ago.
And this is one of the reasons why I think the type of weapon and the type of and the way you carry it makes a big difference. Because I've carried a weapon, and I don't like hip holsters because it makes it really easy to accidentally drop a pistol when you're going to use the restroom, for instance. Personally, myself, I've always carried a shoulder holster where I could reach inside my vest or my shirt, and no matter what I was doing, I always feel it and I know it's there. And
but that law is state to state too, where you're even allowed to carry, right?
I don't know. I wasn't now in New York. Yeah, there might be. Yeah. I think that in California there might be some of those laws as well as about where you can carry. But out here in Arizona, if you have a CCW, a concealed carry weapons permit, in Arizona, you can pretty much carry it on your person wherever you feel comfortable. And a lot of people do feel comfortable on carrying it on their hip. I don't, because I don't want everyone to know that I have it. It's not something I want to show off. It's also something I want to know that I can feel it on my body where I know it's really secure. And for those reasons, I've never actually had a holster hanging where I've had my weapon hanging off my hip.
Neither did James Bond.
Neither did James Bond. Oh, you're good. But as far as like guns in schools go, and I know that this is very likely because of my background and my upbringing of being exposed to guns most of my life, I would actually, and now I live out here in the country as well, and I live in a different part of the country. So I understand in New York about some kids that are trying to get to school probably have enough to deal with just navigating through their own neighborhood with the number of people who are carrying guns and criminals who are carrying guns who shouldn't be. But in parts of the countries that I have lived in, I haven't really been exposed to that problem because, number one, I really don't like living in a big inner city. I just never have. But I would also want my own son, if I had to do this all over again in this day and age. I was curious what your opinion was on this, because I would want my children in a school that either did have armed guards, or it had even teachers maybe that chose to be armed as long as they were safely trained in this weapon and they were certified as a concealed weapons holder. Just in case, that would be a teacher that I would want to get to know personally, or a school faculty member I would want to get to know personally. And if I felt comfortable with the use in their firearm, you can bet I would want my kids in that school and in that class.
It's one of the things that we've been talking about, as I've been learning a lot since December 14th. that there needs to be considerations state to state for what requirements are. I've been out west. I know a lot of the schools are ranch style, where everything's on the first floor, the same as Sandy Hook actually is, and the perimeter is larger because of that. The outside perimeter of the footprint of the building. Here in New York City, a lot of our schools go up instead of out.
Correct.
So those types of differences.
Buildings, yes.
Yeah, so less entrances, less windows on the ground floor, for example. So those types of considerations have come into our discussion about school, about protecting a home, because when you live on the 34th floor of a building, you don't need to worry about your front door being kicked in. You need to worry about the secondary front door being kicked in. So all of those types of things lead to state rights instead of federal rights. And that is exactly why
I was going to bring that up about... Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to walk on your conversation.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to bring that up about... This is where I think that I don't know if national legislation that affects gun control is really going to work, because a lot of this happens to be a states' rights issue, and what may be appropriate in some states, like that I have lived in, like Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, Arizona, Utah, would not necessarily be appropriate in New York. And just because I think there are teachers in Wyoming who grew up around, or even Arizona, who grew up around weapons all their life, a lot of the women that I know are teachers. Let's put it this way. I'm glad that they're friends, because they could shoot the core out of an apple with a .357 at 200 yards. But I don't think that would be appropriate in New York City, and I also wouldn't want to make it mandatory where a teacher or a staff faculty member had to carry a weapon, but those that are due in some parts of the country, I think it's appropriate. I would feel completely comfortable with that in Arizona, Alaska, and Wyoming. I don't think I would feel comfortable with that in like New York.
I've spent 17 days or nights in the Badlands of Wyoming, and we did have a weapon for protection. We were in tents, but the problem when it comes to like the background check is that states border each other. And as Colette mentioned earlier, if I live in a state that has really strong laws, but I can just drive 25 minutes over the border in any direction and get what I need and drive back in, that's why it becomes a federal issue for something like that.
I like I said, I don't know how it works in some of these other states, but when we've had people coming in from Arizona to visit a gun store to buy weapons, and there was just a recent one of these issues that happened where someone came in from California who was denied the right to purchase a weapon. It's like, well, why didn't you purchase a weapon out in California? Oh, well, I can go ahead and save a little more money if I buy it here. Well, you do realize you're going through a federal background check anyway, right? I mean, we are going to run you through NICS, NCS. And the guy started getting really nervous, and the firearm store owner told him, don't think that just because we're an open carry or a right to carry state, that means that everybody has the right to come here, go shopping for a weapon, and turn around and walk out. We are going to go ahead and put you through the same background check that we do our own friends and neighbors. No excuses and no shortcuts. That's it. And he was denied a weapons purchase.
Right, but that's also a prime example of when states' rights work, but on the flip side, they're not functioning somewhere else, which is why something like that might need to be national.
Oh, you're right. That there is a definite correlation between the states' rights issue and the people you're dealing with and what their moral character is. I don't know any people that would go out and buy a weapon for someone else who couldn't pass a background check on their own, because I'll admit I don't want to. That doesn't mean that if I didn't see somebody that I thought was doing that, I'm on a first-name basis with our local police chief, and I would... Jimmy, you wouldn't believe what I just saw, but it happened at blah, blah, blah. These were the people involved, and if I witnessed something like that, here's their license plate number, and I think that you really need to check this out, because there's somebody that just asked another person to go into a gun store and buy him a gun. And if he did it, you definitely believe that I would get all the information I could and turn them over into the authorities.
So, Dwayne, I'm losing you, but at the same time, I also do have to take off. We have a busy week here, and my talking loudly into the microphone is actually keeping one of my kids from going to sleep here. But I really appreciate...
It's also keep your husband from enjoying that World of Warcraft game, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. He keeps wondering what time he can log on to his server. He's shaking his head at you, Dwayne. But anyway, I really appreciate the conversation.
It's been nice talking to you, but I do have to go too. I've got some other things I've got to get done tonight. But I've appreciated and enjoyed the conversation with all of you. And I'm sorry, Colette, now that you're back on, I'm sorry if it seems like I was getting a bit upset with you earlier. I think maybe Brad was right about one thing, is that I could only hear bits and pieces coming through, and unfortunately... I missed probably about 50% of your conversation because I'm on a really poor connection. I also think, and I hate to throw this one at Tim, but I also think that there was, maybe I'm wrong, but it appeared and it sounded to me from Tim that he was actually enjoying some infighting, which was some of the excuse for his remarks and for his taking turns laughing at us, which didn't help at all. I'm glad that we got the chance to go ahead and get together before we sign out again tonight. But you're all right. We've got to find some way to go ahead and solve these problems. And I understand, Colette, that yeah, it does happen in other areas, and I don't know what part of the country that you're in, but I think there's a lot of truth in the fact that if you see something, say something. And we've got to get people over the fact that they can't sit back and be apathetic. If they think that there is something that's gone seriously wrong, get involved. And I would rather be wrong and be looked rather humiliated than to be right and know that I was right and something went seriously wrong and someone got killed and I could have done something about it and I didn't. Because as one of those gun owners, like I said earlier, if I came across a situation where I had to risk my life on the line to get between a shooter and some kids or his victims, and maybe it would save their lives even if it cost me mine, I would do that and get between that shooter and his victims any way I could, even if it means that I got shot in the process.
Well, we wouldn't want that to happen.
I don't want that to happen either. No, I really don't. I think it's every gun owner's nightmare that most gun owners I know view their gun as like a fire extinguisher. They're grateful to have it around. It's going to be great to have if you really need it. Boy, I hope I never actually have to use it and take someone's life with it, or I hope my Christmas tree never catches fire and burns my house to the ground. That's been my experience.
Sounds like a good point to end on.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Colette.
And
good night.